I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Actually, a pretty good turnout. This is probably the most turnout we've had of all the town halls we've done so far. So I appreciate everybody taking some time out of your busy day to come out and listen to us, provide some information to you so you can be informed on this upcoming jail election. I'm County Supervisor Frank Antonori. I'm the board chair. Of course, we have our county attorney here, Lori Zucco, and Judge Thorne, who's the presiding judge for the Superior Court. Of course, Commander Bradshaw is the jail commander, and Megan Kennedy, our nurse. She's in charge of the health department. I'm crappy with names, so I apologize for that. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to kind of give you the business case, the dollar piece of it. The commander and Megan will explain the requirements of why we've gotten to this point, why we need a new jail. And then I'll hand it off to County Attorney Zucco, who will explain some of the cost-saving measures the County Attorney's Office is going to implement to reduce the impact on the jail and other aspects related to public safety, to make sure that people that belong in jail are in jail, and that people that maybe made a mistake but are we get another chance, She'll explain all that. Of course, Judge Thorne will explain all the legal procedural stuff involving pretrial stuff and hearings and arraignments and stuff that we're going to look at potentially using in the jail. He can explain that. So I'm going to kick it off. As you know, on November 4th, we're asking the voters of Cochise County to approve a half-cent sales tax to use that funding to build a new jail. What's different this time than last time is a few things. In May of 23, there was a lawsuit shortly after that election alleging that the county inadvertently disenfranchised about 10,000 voters. So to explain that aspect, the reality is that we had an inactive voter list, but they were still, by law, registered voters. Because we did mail-only balloting, no in-person voting, and those voters were not notified or given an opportunity to vote, the appellate court determined in that lawsuit that there was the potential that those voters were disenfranchised. There was an appeal to the Supreme Court, but rather than finish with the Supreme Court, the county settled the lawsuit on those grounds to basically reconduct the election and now have in-person voting for this election. So the election that will be in November will have mail-in ballots, just like every other election. However, it will now have an opportunity for those that want to vote in person, and the individuals on the inactive voter list will still have that opportunity to vote if they so desire at one of the voting places. So that remedied that issue. The other thing that the new Board of Supervisors did is we modified the way that we're going to spend and fund this project. The previous one was a 25-year tax, and it was for covering both the cost of construction of jail and the maintenance and operation of that jail. So what we've decided to do is continue to fund the maintenance and operation like we have out of the general fund, and use the sales tax only for the purposes of constructing a new jail. So anything associated with the planning, design, and building of that new building is going to be funded through this half-cent sales tax. The stuff that was voted on by the previous board, of course, we can't remedy because that money was spent. But what we then did was we immediately stopped any of the MOE, the maintenance of effort spending, using that jail tax, and we made sure that only the revenue coming in was being put in a separate segregated account that's currently being held by the county treasurer, and that money will only be used for the construction. We reimbursed what we could that was spent out of there for other than construction, but already about roughly $1 million had been spent. But we pretty much paid back everything after we were elected that was being spent on that, with the exception of money that was being spent directly for the planning and construction of the jail. So we used that money to pay for Chin Planning, who was our consultant that provided the basic scoping of the jail. We just hired an owner's rep, Veneer, that is going to be involved with the contracting. They're basically like the prime contractor. They're going to help us make sure we select the proper contractors and we get our most bang for our buck. So that we just hired them. And then we have a project manager, Phil, and we pay Phil out of that money because he's in charge of the project on behalf of the county. He is a former county manager from Yavapai County, and he oversaw the construction of the jail in Yavapai County, so he's an experienced project manager. So that money is coming out of the sales tax. The rest of the money from the sales tax has been, again, given to the treasurer, and Ms. Trawick has isolated that money, and the only way that money can be spent is with approval of the board of supervisors. And again, the board will only approve money if it's directly related to the planning and construction of the jail. So all the rest of the costs, the operating costs that the sheriff's office needs, is all coming, as it has in the past, from the general fund. And the reason we did that was we want to build this jail and then pay it off as quickly as possible. So, like the previous plan was, they were going to bond, they were going to get a 25-year bond for the jail, but because we're only going to spend the money on the construction of the jail, we're going to get a 15-year bond. And then any money left over at the end of the year, after paying the maintenance on that bond, we're going to use that leftover funding from that half-cent tax to pay the principal down. So in these little handouts here, you'll see an accelerated payoff schedule that's in there with the amortization schedule for the 15-year bond. And you can see that if we pay it off in 13 years, we'll save the county about $5 million. And if we pay it off in 11 years, we'll save the county, I should be saying, the taxpayers, about $10 million. Last month, which was the last month that tax was collected, because the tax stopped on July 31st. That was the last day the half-cent sales tax was collected. As of August 1st, that tax is no longer being collected. We just got that July payment from the Department of Revenue, and it was $998,000. So it was almost $1 million a month. So if it continues at that, if the voters reapprove it, that tax will get turned on again on July 1st. And if that tax brings in roughly $1 million a month, the maintenance on the bond will roughly be about $7.5 million. That means almost $5 million will be able to be put towards the principal at the end of every year. So we will be able to pay that bond off really quickly. It is the hope of the board that we will pay that bond off in about 10 or 11 years, and then the sales tax will go away. And that will be the end of that. And then we will continue to fund the jail as it always has been funded out of the general fund and out of the existing half-cent sales tax that the county has always had. So that is the intent right now. So this will not be a tax that goes on forever, and it will likely go on. We had to go to you, and we had to ask for, you'll see in the publicity pamphlet, we had to ask for a 17-year period for this, because if you approve it in November, we cannot turn that tax back on, because the Department of Revenue requires 6 months notice to turn the tax back on. So that's December, January, February, March, April, May, June. And then July 1st, it can be turned on. Once that tax starts, then we can go get the bond. The bonding company won't talk to us until we have a revenue source, which is the half-cent. So as soon as we get the tax turned on, then we can go get the bonding company. So we're already 6-7 months in by the time that happens. Then it'll take a month or two to finalize the bond. So we'll probably get the bond probably sometime in October. So that's what adds the extra time. The intent is to pay this off as quickly as possible. But we have to ask the voters for 17 years. And the bonding company requires us to get 15 years, because if there's an economic downturn, they want to make sure that if sales tax revenue drops, the county still can pay the maintenance on the bond, basically the mortgage, the interest and principal on that bond. So we had to take out a 15-year bond at $7.5 million a year. But the intent is, since the tax is bringing in around $11 million or so, to take all that money and put whatever's left after we pay the $7.5 million for that year, that remaining money on whatever gets generated will then be put directly back. Right now, we have roughly about $15.5 million in the bank with the treasurer. That's how much from the current sales tax has been generated. That money has not been touched, and like I said, that will be used for the construction of the jail. Oh, I don't think so. The current budget is $130 million. That does not include interest. And if you want to see the interest, you can look at this schedule right here. It will show you what the interest is over the duration of the bond. But again, if we paid the full 15 years, it's roughly $40 million in interest, so that would be 130 plus 40 if we took the full 15 years, which we're not going to do. But that, to be straightforward, is the total amount that will be spent. We're going to get a $100 million bond. $100 million bond. We've got $20 million coming from the state. The sheriff went and got a grant from the state through the legislature, through Gail Griffin, for $20 million. That is actually 20% up to $20 million is what the statute says. So when we get the $100 million, then we can show that as our contribution. Then 20% of that is $20 million. So that's we're going to get that from the state. So that's $120 million there. Plus we have about $15 million left over, but $10 million of that is going to be for management reserve. We're going to put that to management reserve. So that's where the $130 million comes from. Of that $130 million, $90 million is actually going to be what the building is going to cost. The actual physical construction of the building, all the material and labor to build a new jail, is going to be roughly about $90 million. About $10 million is going to be used for the planning and the architectural designs and all the prep that goes into the RFPs that go out to the contractors, all the legal aspects, the surveying, all that will be done for $10 million. And then there's $20 million in there for site prep and utilities. So site prep and utilities would be all of the leveling of the land, all the diversion of water so we don't flood the new jail, and make sure that's all properly channeled, and bringing all the utilities into the jail, all the trenching, and then bringing in the pipes for the sewer line, the pipes for the water line, and the high voltage lines for the utilities. That's all going to be roughly about $20 million. And so then the rest of the construction, the $90 million, will physically build the building. So that's where that budget is. So it's $10 million for the design and planning, it's $20 million for the site prep and utilities, $90 million for the actual building, and $10 million for management reserve. And what management reserve is, the way we're going to contract this thing so that the contractor does not build risk into his quote for inflation, the county is going to assume material risk. So if the price of lumber goes up or concrete goes up, the county will pay the difference in the price that the original contractor in his quote bid for material. Any inflation we will pay. And what that does is that does not have him build that risk into his quote. Anybody familiar with contracting, a lot of contractors, if they're worried about inflation, what they'll do is they'll do a worst case scenario and then they'll put that in their bid. And if that does not happen, they actually keep the difference. So what we did is we basically said we're going to assume the risk for material inflation, so the contractor only bids labor and material at the current market price when he does his RFP. If inflation occurs, and that $10 million will be used to pay that down. If inflation does not occur, that $10 million, upon completion of the jail, when we cut the ribbon and hand the keys to the sheriff's office, that $10 million will go immediately towards the bond to pay the bond out. So that will be a lump sum payment towards the principal of that bond if it's not used to cover inflationary costs of the jail. That is the current plan that we have right now to minimize the impact and reduce the interest payment as much as possible on the taxpayer. So that is the hope. But inflation is inflation, and that would be 3 to 4 years from now. Nobody can predict what concrete and steel and copper and everything else that goes in that jail will cost 3 or 4 years from now. But we have that $10 million set aside as a management reserve for inflation. If we don't use it, whatever's left out of that $10 million that doesn't get used to pay the material inflation costs of the jail will immediately go to the bond to pay the bond out, so that we can pay that bond off as quickly as possible. The other things we're doing is we're putting some cost savings into the design of this jail. When we met with the owner's rep, and part of the process when we're going to be selecting an architect is we're going to use architects that are experienced with jail design. We're going to try to leverage a lot of the work they've already done and lessons learned from previous jails that they've built. But unlike the current jail, the one big key difference is all of the utilities are going to be built in their own special dedicated corridors where they'll be separated from the detainees/inmates. Right now, a lot of those, and the commander will tell you, it goes right through areas, hallways, and stuff where the current inmates are. And what that means is if they have to go in there and fix something and maintain something, they have to move the inmates out and get them out of the way. The new jail won't have to do that. They'll have their separate isolated area where all the utilities will run through the separate isolated, so the maintenance guys from the county facilities department can get in there and do their maintenance without disrupting the jail operations. The other thing that we're going to have the architect do is design a maintenance schedule into the design of the jail, so that we will have, when they finish building this, basically the maintenance plan that tells us how often we change the air filters, how often we flush the pipes, how often we check the furnace and the air conditioner. All of that will be built in, and that schedule will be adhered to by the county, because the intent now, at a minimum, is to have this new jail last a minimum of 75 years, with the hope of it lasting as much as 100 years. And that's the difference between the previous jail. It was very difficult for them to maintain this jail because it was not designed as a jail. So it made it very difficult, and that's why a lot of the challenges and issues they're having now is based on the original design. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to build the jail for modularity. Right now we have an inmate population, a detainee population that fluctuates between 250 and 300. So the Chin study, which was one of the consultants we hired, basically did a population estimate growth for the county over the next 50 years. And said if you were to grow this much each year, the jail population would likely increase by a certain amount. So they had recommended a planning of about 600 detainees, a jail that can handle 600 detainees. But we are not at that number right now. And it will be a while before, hopefully, a while before we hit that number. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this jail. The current one that we're asking you to fund is going to be built for 400 detainees. It will be able to house 400 detainees. However, the support services, such as the kitchen, cafeteria, and the health department and whatnot, will be designed to handle up to 600. So the kitchen will be built for a capacity of 600 prisoners, but maybe only half of the kitchen is going to be used until we need to. We're going to build basically enough cells or cell blocks, or what is it called? Pods. Cell pods for 400 inmates. They're going to be different. They're not going to all be just 4 cookie cutters, because some, as the commander will explain, we have different categories of detainees. So that basic design will be the basis of the start of the jail, and if the population grows and we hit 400, then we could build another 100 cells in another pod, and then if it hits 500, then we can build another, and we can build all the way out to a total of 600. So that is the plan right now that the county has on the how we're going to manage this project and how we're going to be stewards of your tax dollars to make sure that is the case. So the last thing I want to hit on is the reason we went with a sales tax is roughly about 20% of that tax is going to be generated from people that do not live in Cochise County. So you have a lot of tourists. You have a lot of people, especially along the I-10 corridor, that stop and get gas and go to the truck stops and the fast food places and whatnot on there. And of course the tourists that come into Tombstone or come watching hummingbirds in Sierra Vista come down here and spend their money, right? So those folks will chip in because there is a segment of the population in our jail that is not from Cochise County as well. So it only stands to reason that we have other counties and other folks support the construction of this jail and not put the complete burden on the taxpayers of Cochise County. The other side of the equation for a property tax, what a lot of people don't know, is less than half of the people in this county actually own property. So if you were to raise property taxes, basically you would have half of the people in Cochise County pay for the whole jail, which is, in my opinion, a fair way to go. So that's why we did not go with the property tax, because it would be a very small population of the tax-paying community that would end up having to chip in to fund this jail. So the best option to spread the burden as low and as equally as possible was the sales tax, and then the benefit of that, of course, is we also get funding from people that come from outside Cochise County and spend their money here. So that was the reason we went with the sales tax. Another lady asked me, well, how about if you, instead of doing ½ cent, you went with a quarter cent? We could do that, but what that does is it requires us, because the bonding companies are based on revenue, it would require us to extend the duration of that bond, and we don't want to do that because the interest payment on that would just eat that 0.25% savings up. So we could save a 0.25%, but we'll end up losing that and paying actually more for the jail with a 0.25% sales tax than a 0.5% sales tax. So that was the reason we went with a 0.5 sales tax, it's so we could pay this off as fast as possible. The legislature caps the county at 1 cent. Unlike cities that can charge more than 1 cent, the county is prohibited by law from charging more than a 1 cent sales tax. So we already have a 0.5 cent sales tax. And we're going to ask you to add another 0.5 cent. At that point, that's as much as the county can do for sales tax. We cannot raise sales tax above 1 cent. So we also want to pay this jail off as quickly as possible, so if there's an emergency or something in the future and the community determines we need, let's say, like a new hospital, a county hospital, we want to, or we have a disaster and we have to do a major road repair or something along those lines, we would not be able to go out for a 0.5 cent sales tax because we're already capped. So if we hurry up and pay this off and free up that 0.5 cent sales tax, it's available for the future if the county will need to come back and ask the voters for some other emergency or project or something else that we may need to do that. To include, if we have to, 25 years from now, add another 100 cells to the cell block, we could come back and say, hey, we need to do another 0.5 cent sales tax to build another 100 cells or 100 bed pod for the next inmates because we're at 500 population. So that's the plan. So I'll take questions at the end, but what I want to do is I want to hand it off to the commander here so he can explain to you all the aspects related to the current jail and why it's critical that we find a way to build a new jail because, quite frankly, there's really no other option. We're at that point now. So let me hand it off to you.
Thanks, Frank. Good evening. I'm Kenny Bradshaw. I'm the jail commander. I just got 39 years in detention and corrections. I did 24 years with the Department of Corrections. I've been the commander in Cochise County for 15 years. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about what terrible shape the jail's in because I know a lot of you have questions. I don't want to save time for that. But one of the biggest issues that we face in Cochise County is our mental health issues. If one of our deputies gets called to Circle K for the 3rd time during his shift because some guy's out there cussing everybody out coming in and out and he won't leave, he has no choice but to charge him with disorderly, trespassing, whatever, and bring him to jail. We do have one small mental health treatment. It's on the 4th floor of the Canyon Vista Hospital. It has 14 beds. And when they were building Canyon Vista, the CEO came and visited with the sheriff and myself and said, it's great, we're going to have a mental health facility and it's going to have 14 beds. And we said, we'll fill that in 2 weeks. And he said, well, we just visited with the fort and they told us the same thing. And the fort has priority over us, obviously, and they should have. And there's a real reluctance to take people that are incarcerated. They want them to be released before they go to the hospital. So look, that deputy has no choice but to bring them to jail. And normally these people are so mentally ill that I can't put them in general population because the general population will either prey on them or they're so out of control that they could injure the general population and they have to be isolated. Well, you or me isolated for any amount of time, we start to lose it a little bit, so we're not doing these folks any good. In a new modern day jail, they have these mental health living areas where they have mental health professionals 24 hours a day in these areas that can adjust their beds on a phone call. They have carpeted areas, plants, because being mentally ill should not be a crime. We need really to help these folks out, and in Cochise County, we're not doing that. We have to require, or the law requires, that they have to be able to assist in their own defense when they're charged with a crime. So there's a rule called Rule 11, and it's a restoration to competency. We don't have a restoration to competency program. We have a little restoration to competency program here where we have an outside doctor that comes in, but we also have big restoration, one in Pima County and one at the Arizona State Hospital. If we send them to Pima County, it's $36,000 for the treatment, whether it's 1 day or whether it's a year. If we send them to ASH, the Arizona State Hospital, it's $100,000 whether they stay 1 day or a year. And then they come back and they can help in their own defense. So if we had these kind of programs, we could be saving tons of money instead of spending tons of money. When the jail was built, like Chairman Antonori said, when it was built originally, it wasn't built correctly. I'm not knocking the people that did it, but they didn't obviously have a lot of correctional experience. And times have changed. So let me talk about the correctional experience first. In 39 years, I've been in a lot of different prisons, a lot of different jails around the country, and I have never seen porcelain fixtures in a jail. Our jail in Cochise County was built with porcelain fixtures. Over time, we've been able to replace probably a quarter of that with stainless steel, correctional grade fixtures, but stainless steel is really expensive. And when we build that, it costs a lot of money. So as we go through and have a little bit of money, we buy stainless and replace that. But about twice a year, we have somebody who smashes a toilet or smashes a sink and then wants to use the porcelain as a weapon, and we have to deal with that. So, and along those lines, 40 years ago when it was built, we had a whole different population. Not only were they not dealing with the mental health crisis, they didn't have the opioid crisis that we have today. And Megan's going to talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But we didn't have as many females being arrested. We didn't have the kind of crime that we have now. I mean, we didn't have the human smuggling. We didn't have all the, it's just amazing. We have 11 different classifications. So this morning's count was 251. We have total beds in Bisbee of 302. We have 19 beds here in Sierra Vista, and we have 16 beds in Wilcox. And those are basically just booking areas. Just because we're the 38th largest landmass county in the United States, we're 6,300 square miles. So we didn't want somebody to get arrested in Bowie, have that deputy or DPS trooper or whatever have to drive all the way to Bisbee. So that's why the Wilcox is there. And then Sierra Vista being the population center, that's why we have the booking center here. If they're held past their initial appearance, which they have to be seen by a judge within 24 hours, then we usually move them to Bisbee. So of those 11 different classifications, we have protective custody, we have trustee, we have minimum, we have medium, we have maximum, we have super maximum, we have 23-1, which is you're in your cell 23 hours a day, you get out for 1 hour a day, and during that hour, you have the opportunity to shower, have a video visit, and make a phone call, whatever you need to do, and then you're back in your cell for another 23. So modern new jails have dormitory styles and it's a lot less staff intensive. And that's one of the things that we've been discussing with the board is how do we run this better, more efficiently, and not have to spend so much money on staff. And there's a lot of different levels of supervision and different models of supervision. There's direct supervision where officers are actually embedded into the living areas all the time. They get to know those inmates. And they know that this guy gets up every morning at 2 o'clock and goes to the bathroom because I hear the toilet flush. They get to know what's going on and what's routine. But linear supervision is what we have now, where every 30 minutes they have to make rounds and go through 5 or 6 different living areas, checking to make sure everybody's okay, come back, log all that, and by that time, 30 minutes is up and they got to start again and go through it again. One of the big things that people don't realize is municipalities have to pay incarceration costs if there's no jail district. The biggest incarceration costs come from, we are charging, is Huachuca City and Tombstone. Because Huachuca City and Tombstone have their own magistrate, they're not part of the consolidated court agreement that the rest of the municipalities in the county are. Because of that, we charge them, the county charges them, incarceration costs, which is $324 for the first day and $67 and change for every day thereafter. I mean, for that kind of money, you could get a better room at a really nice hotel. But we have a lot of administrative costs, program costs, clothing, everything else. Every time we flip a switch, that we have the county hires a company to come in and figure out what those per diem costs are. If there's a district and there's a tax in place, then there are no incarceration costs whatsoever. Because we have the consolidated court agreement, the municipalities that are part of that don't have their own magistrate, they're not totally relieved of that. They still have to pay some, but it's not that big of an amount. What would happen if the tax doesn't pass? And we have to maintain the current jail, and we don't have the money to do it. Mr. Antonori talked about, a property tax, but I want to talk about what would happen inside the jail. Maricopa County just got out from under a 15-year consent decree. That's where the federal government, Department of Justice comes in and says, there's a lot of problems here, and you're bordering on violating people's civil rights the way you're holding them in this jail. So we're gonna embed a judge and 2 monitors into your jail to make sure that you guys are doing everything right and you're trying to improve the conditions and doing whatever you need to do. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay the salary of the judge and those 2 monitors. And I wish the sheriff was here because he has the amount that Maricopa County actually paid, but I believe it was over $600 million over 15 years because of having to be monitored by the Department of Justice. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan Kennedy. She's our Director of Jail Medical, and she can tell you about some of the issues that she has.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate you guys being here to hear the facts and ask your questions. I won't take too much of your time because I want to be able to hear what Ms. Zuko and Judge Thorne have to say as well and hear your guys' questions. But like the commander said, in 1986, when the jail was built, it wasn't built appropriately. It wasn't built to standard, it wasn't built to code. And one of the things that was an afterthought was a medical department. So there wasn't a clinic, there wasn't a medical area whenever the jail was originally built. What we have done is adapted and moved into what used to be the locker rooms. So our clinic is in a space that's about 10 foot by 12 foot, which is smaller than most people's master bedrooms. And that's where we're providing care to individuals that come into the facility. The content of the population is completely different than it used to be as well. I mean, it's different than it used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago, let alone 40 years ago. And when I say the content of the population, I'm looking at a lot of the healthcare concerns that we have now that we didn't have prior to or within the last 4 years, and how much more chronic healthcare has become. We have a lot of individuals who are coming in that are addicted to some form of medication or addicted to illegal drugs, and they're suffering from substance abuse issues. Being a border county, we face a lot more of the opioid pandemic. It affects us a lot more heavily. It affects the entire world, but we definitely see a lot of that. We have individuals that come into our facility, and a lot of them are going to be withdrawing from illegal drugs. A lot of them are going to be withdrawing from some form of substance, alcohol, opiates, whatever that may be. We have to provide them care. We also have to continue to provide, chronic illness medications and care for those things. And we are required to provide constitutionally adequate health care. It's not an option. We don't have an option. We can't decide, yes, we will, or no, we won't. We have to provide constitutionally adequate health care. And one of the things that people, I'm not sure everybody understands, is that whenever you have somebody that comes into the jail, into a local detention facility, the majority of those individuals aren't going to prison. They're being released back out into the community. And when they're released back out into the community, we want them to be successful. We want to be able to set them up for success so that they don't come back into jail. And so we want to be able to start them on the right path as soon as they enter the facility. So we work really hard on our community reentry programs, getting those individuals set up with good care, getting them set up with community providers, so whenever they are released, they can continue with good care, they can continue with medications for opioid use disorder, they can continue with services, whether that be rehab services, drug treatment services, anything like that. We want to get them set up appropriately. And so what better place to start public health than at that, and hopefully also decrease our recidivism rate, and those individuals won't be coming back into the jail. The Sheriff's Office is really good at seeking grant funding, and the Sheriff's done an excellent job in getting a lot of funding from grants. Well, the medical department was lucky enough to be awarded a grant a couple of years ago, and the grant focused specifically on community reentry and opioid use disorder. We are super happy with the funding that we've received, and we've been able to use it very adequately, and it's helped in a lot of programs in a lot of areas. One of the things that's a little disappointing is had we had a modern facility with areas where we could provide a lot more services, some of those services the commander had just talked about, where he's talking about those mental health areas and embedding mental health professionals into the population, all of those things, and yeah, classroom, anything like that, it would have been wonderful to be able to request a larger amount of funding. But when we don't have a facility that supports those programs, we can't ask for funding that we can't use to provide those services because we don't have the facility to do it. I think that's probably about all I have. I'll be available for questions if you guys have any. Thank you.
Hello. Oh. Hi everyone, I'm Lori Zucco. I'm the county attorney since January. Thank you all for coming out today. Just to give you a little bit of my background, before I was elected county attorney, I was the chief criminal deputy for the county attorney's office since 2018, and I've been with that office prosecuting felony cases since 2009. I've been practicing criminal law since 1996. So I'm very familiar with the criminal justice system and with the criminal justice system in the jail in Cochise County. I was asked specifically to talk about some jail reduction strategies that were brought up in the SHIN planning, basically so that, they wanted to build a jail for 400 people right now. We know it might go up to 600, but they want us to come up with some strategies so that it doesn't go up to 600. Because I think that everybody probably understands that the jail is a temporary detention facility. It's where you go while you're awaiting your trial, while you're awaiting your hearing on, resolving your case or your petition to revoke probation. It's not where you go to serve your sentence for raping or killing somebody. Obviously, that's the Department of Corrections. So it's really beneficial if we can reduce the population of the jail, because it's not meant as a correction facility or even as necessarily a punishment facility, although that is where misdemeanor defendants go to serve their sentence. All misdemeanor cases, the sentences are only served at the jail, not the Department of Corrections. So what the SHIN planning focused on was county attorney diversion programs as one of the jail reduction strategies. So let me tell you, when I became chief criminal deputy in 2018, we had a very small adult diversion program. And since I was in that position, we started the GRACE, Giving Recovery a Chance, mental health diversion program. And we have saved the county millions of dollars in those restoration to competency Rule 11 fees with our GRACE program. It's run by Christina Watkins, and she does an excellent job. Just to touch on what Commander Bradshaw was saying, even if we do a restoration to competency at our jail, it's $15,000. Right now, we don't actually have a contract with Pima County. They're not taking people. But yes, ASH is in the neighborhood. ASH is the Arizona State Hospital. Restoring somebody to competency there. Like recently, I think 2 years ago, we restored a very violent offender who was out on parole from Colorado for manslaughter, came down here and raped his girlfriend. And we had to spend about $100,000 to restore him to competency at the Arizona State Hospital. Roger Wilson was a gentleman that I prosecuted for first-degree murder, and then he got convicted on a retrial of second-degree murder. We spent about $100,000 restoring him to competency. But, these are very violent offenders that, we have to try them. It's in the public safety to spend this money. But if we have a more modern facility, then perhaps we can restore them for the $15,000 or something like that at our own facility. Just those two cases, that would have saved us like $170,000 if we had a better jail mental health program. So we did start the graph. Obviously, somebody like those two offenders are not going to go into our mental health diversion program, but we do serve a lot of the, I'll call them like the frequent flyer mental health people that they're talking about, that, they can't go to the fourth floor. It's overcrowded. There's not a lot of services in town. So these people end up at the jail for their chronic shoplifting, their chronic trespass at Circle K, their chronic fights with their siblings at their house. They get these low-level domestic violences, and the parents just can't handle them. So that is what a lot of the mental health people that go through the jail. We try to get those people through our GRACE program, where we connect them to services, and we particularly try to serve the SMI, seriously mentally ill population, through that program. But and then a couple years ago, we got a grant for $500,000 for the Rural Alternative Prosecution Program grant through the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. And we were able to hire a drug diversion coordinator and a staff person. So we now have a really vigorous, even pre-complaint filing drug diversion program for low-level and first-time drug possession offenders. And so what our drug diversion coordinator does is sometimes she'll just go through the inmate list and see who got picked up on possession cases, and she'll screen them to see if they're appropriate for her program. And she'll send a letter to them, hey, engage with us in our program, get treatment, and if you complete it, then you never even get your felony complaint filed. And that's really helpful for these, really low-level offenders, first-time people involved in the criminal justice system, so that they can get their life on track and they're not saddled with a felony conviction on their record. We also have, in our adult diversion program, we service misdemeanor defendants, domestic violence offenders. A lot of the people that enter our program have a domestic violence case, but no prior convictions, and it's not a serious physical injury case, but they maybe have a security clearance on post for their contract job, or even they're in the military, and so they need to resolve that case. They need anger management counseling. They might need substance abuse counseling. But maybe they don't need that felony conviction on their record, so they will enter our program and we'll try to resolve their case that way. We are also starting, next month, we're rolling out a veterans court in JP5, and that will serve our veterans community, and we are partnering with the Warrior Healing Center and other treatment partners with that. So you'll be hearing more about that. We're going to be promoting it with the Sheriff's Department. So that's some of the programs that we've been doing to try to reduce the jail population. And like I said, that's not to say that we're not being tough on crime, but we like to focus our resources on those high-level repeat offenders, those serious victim cases, those child cases, and ideally we would like to get them through the system, out of the jail, on their way to the Department of Corrections as swiftly as possible. But if people really are the low-level offenders, then let's get them out of the jail. Let's get them connected to services and treatment, and we're doing that to the best that we can with our programs. So I'm available for questions at the end if you have any. And again, thank you for coming out tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Thorne, I'm the presiding judge here in Cochise County, and I think the good quality of the judge is to listen a lot more than he talks, so I'm going to keep this very brief. We call it a criminal justice system, and the reason it's a system is because the jail is just one component of the system. The people in the jail have the right to counsel, so lawyers have to go visit their clients in the jail. People in jail have to go to court from time to time. Part of the idea in the schematics, at least my understanding of it, is we're going to have a space for a courtroom within the jail, so we can have things like arraignments, we can have things like detention hearings, we can have things like initial appearances. Right now, there's nowhere, there's a room that used to be a law library, which means they had books in there. Now there's a kiosk that's a computer that they upgrade once every year or 6 months. But that's where the judges that have to go in there and do these initial appearances and arraignments, etc., go into this, just a room, and there's a table, like a folding table like it's in front of you, and a chair for the judge on one side and the defendant on the other. And so the judge has to engage with those folks. There's no space for that. In '86, when the jail was finally built, the prior jail had been the top 2 floors of the Cochise County main courthouse in Bisbee. And I don't know if anybody's ever been to the main courthouse there, but if you look up, you can still see the bars on the windows of the top 2 floors. And so one of the floors was for male inmates, adult male inmates, and the floor above that was for females and juveniles. And that worked pretty well because you would get the folks who had court onto an elevator, you would bring them down to the division where they had court, they would have court, and they would go back up there. Well, when they built the new jail, for reasons that are incomprehensible to me, they don't have any space for that. So now what they do is when we have court, for example, this morning we have early resolution court, and there were, I don't know, many cases. Anecdotally, I heard through the grapevine, it was very busy today. So that means that they have to take 2 vans at a time of prisoners who have belly chains and their legs are chained together, and they have to take them, 6 at a time? So there's a dozen inmates or so that'll go over there and they'll do their cases, and then they have to take them back, and then they load up 2 more vans and they bring them over. So it's just a very inefficient way. If you had 1 judge and 1 clerk go out to the jail to do these, then you don't need to move these guys. You don't have the liability of somebody falling down or some kind of jailbreak like in Superman 2, or was it the first Superman when they stopped the prison van and I don't know what that is, but you know, we're in Louisiana. I don't know what you mean by that, but
Well, they broke out of the actual jail.
oh, they broke out of the jail.
Because it was an old jail that wasn't designed right.
Yeah, so who here drove a car that's 1986 or older to the meeting today? I don't see a lot of hands. But many of you, by the looks of you, were driving cars in 1986. How come you just didn't take that car back and get new brakes and get new tires and get a new engine when you hit 200,000 miles? Because it didn't have airbags, and because it didn't have GPS, and because it didn't have all these other modern technologies that make it safer and more efficient and better. So my point is this: every 50 years or so, you got to build a new jail. The technology keeps up or gets more advanced. It's just better for everybody involved. So let's pass the jail tax. Tell your friends and get a new jail that meets modern standards, because people in Cochise County deserve nice things just like everyone else. And so I'm not saying jail is nice, but they're still human beings. They're still going through the worst times of their lives. The vast majority of them get out on probation, and they pay the half-cent sales tax when they get out of jail, and they pay their child support, and they go support your businesses and your friends' businesses. So it's the right thing to do. We're open to any questions that you might have. I don't think any of us are looking for an argument with anybody on any particular issue that you might have, but we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
So with that, let me open it up to the floor. If anybody's out there. Did I turn this on? Oh, there it is. Actually, I hit the button. So if anybody has a question, Jane will run the microphone over too, so everybody can hear. Oh, gentleman right up front here.
You know, it's like nobody wants to. Thanks. I thought you were going to take it away from me. No, take it away from him. You know, no one wants to throw up in church, so, but I will. So, I have a few questions. My first one. Well, first of all, my name is John Black. I've been a resident of Cochise County for 32 years. I've been a property owner for 32 years, and I'm not in arrears on any of my taxes. So I have a position here that I'm worried about. First of all, where's my supervisor?
Oh, Mr. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Crosby has taken a neutral position, and he is putting it up, as he said in the meeting, to the will of the voters. He does not want to influence them one way or the other. So that's why he's not participating.
And he's an elected official saying that kind of thing. Anyway, you don't need to defend him. I just need to say that. Because here we are in his district, and basically his meeting, you came from Wilcox.
Actually, everything west of 7th Street is my district, all the way
Yeah,
up
I
through the
know.
Ford and everything. So I got that section of Sierra Vista, Fry, that's all in my district there. So I got a little bit of turf down here. So.
Little bit. So my second question, I didn't expect an answer from that, but I wanted to say it, because it bothers me as a taxpayer. I spent in the workplace 40 years total, and I learned one thing is, if you have a course of action, it's always good to have a backup plan, not a wish, not a hope. So what is the backup plan if this effort to get a half a penny sales tax fails?
You're not gonna like the answer. So Plan B, because we've come to the determination that it would be overly expensive to renovate the jail that exists now. Part of the reason is, like I said, because of where all the pipes and plumbing and the conduit and the cabling is, it's in the same area that the detainees are. So in order to, and when we talked to one of the contractors that gave us a rough idea of what it would take to renovate that jail, the answer is we have to gut it. So in order to gut it, we have to take all of the detainees and inmates out, which means we have to move them to another county and detain them. Right now, it was Pinal County, was the county that we had looked at. The transportation costs alone, as the judge mentioned, as the commander mentioned, moving inmates back and forth for their trials, for the municipalities to ship them up there, to ship them back, is about $9 million to $10 million bucks a year, just for shipping back and forth. And then you got to pay to house them, which is another $10 to $15 million a year. So you're looking at $25 million a year just for sticking them somewhere else to renovate the jail. And then it's cost about $40 million to renovate the jail. So you're probably at about $100 million to put a Band-Aid on a jail that's going to fall apart in 15 years. You're only going to extend the life of the jail for 15 years. So that option is not an option. So the board has determined if we don't get the half-cent sales tax, we're going to have to look at building a new jail anyway. So how do we build that new jail? We would have to extend the bond for 25 years because we will not have the revenue from the half-cent sales tax. We will have to use the general fund to pay for that. So we'd have to go to a 25-year bond. We would have to scale the jail down, reduce the size possibly to 300, cut it back, so maybe it will not have the capacity to hold 600 detainees, so it would be smaller. We would also have to, because the state caps our general fund expenditures based on population, that number is 83 million right now. Our budget this year was 81, so there's only a $2 million space that we can spend additional money. So in order to expand that enough to pay for what would be the maintenance on the bond, which would roughly be about $5 million a year, we would have to cut $3 million in spending. So you would see reductions towards road maintenance, you'd see reductions towards the sheriff's office, where we gave every deputy this year a pay raise. All the line officers, the sergeants and below, all got a, was it 4% or 3%? I can't remember. I think it was a 4% pay raise. We wouldn't be able to give those guys pay raises while we're doing that, so we would stop all county employee pay raises, which nobody wants to do because of inflation. You want to at least keep them with inflation. So we would also cut health and human services. We would have to find $3 million somewhere, and then to make the $2 million difference, we would have to raise your property taxes. And I don't want to raise your property tax. I just cut your property taxes. The board just gave everybody in the county a 2% property tax cut. We just did that rate cut this year. So the last thing we want to do is, after we cut everybody's taxes 2%, is do a 9 to 11% increase in property taxes, which you guys will not be happy with. But that's the alternative, because if we don't do that, then the scenario that Commander Bradshaw had discussed is if somebody files a civil rights lawsuit against the county saying that they were detained and have abhorrent, unsafe, or dangerous conditions or something, and the Justice Department rules that we violated their civil rights, then we get stuck in this consent decree, and they come down here, and then they make us raise your taxes, and then they make us pay for the observers in the jail, and that's more money wasted. So the best option is to just bite the bullet, do the half-cent sales tax, but that is Plan B. that it is not a very nice option, but we do have a plan B. It's just not, I think it's just not a very nice option.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's not a good option.
I mean, it's the only one we can think of, and we've put it, every meeting, we've asked everybody here, if you don't like either of those two options, please tell us a third option, but we've looked at this, and, you know, we're to operate within the constraints that the legislature allows, because, again, they put a spending cap on counties, and they said if you don't have the population, then you should only be spending, which I believe, because I was in the legislature, and I agree with that. So if you have 130,000 people, a county with 130,000 people should only be spending $83 million a year for the services for 130,000 people. If we had 1 million people in this county, our budget would be about $400 million a year, but we don't have 1 million people in this county. So that's the limitations they put on it. It's based on population. So we get a certain amount of dollars per person that we can spend. So that cap is 83 million. So if we had to build this jail without the half-cent sales tax, so when you vote for this, you're starting a special district, a jail district. That does not count against that cap. It is a separate category, like a fire district or school district. It is not part of the county's cap, spending cap. So it comes out from under that cap. That's why we're able to spend 7, 10, 12 million a year on the jail, because it doesn't affect our cap. If we had to do it without the approval of the voters, we would not have the jail district. Then we'd have to do it under the general fund, and that's the problem. The problem is we're capped at 83 million. We're already spending 81 million, and we got to find 5 million a year to do a 25-year bond and pay for a new jail.
Well, thank you for your candor.
Yeah.
There's only one option as far as I'm concerned, and that's the sales tax. And somehow I keep hearing on the street, there are a lot of people that are against the sales tax. They're against any kind of a tax. So I don't know, somehow that's got to get out and make, and your very candid remarks, and they're very clear to me. And I don't know why there would be rumors on the street about, oh, we're not going to vote for that tax, because it's a tax. And I had some other questions, but I want to leave it at that, because I don't want to, these are minor questions.
One of the things the supervisors heard from was, we heard from a lot of these smaller towns, right? So like Tombstone and Wilcox and Benson, and to them, a half-cent sales tax for 25 years hurts them, and it encourages people to go other places. So that's why we tried to come up with this plan to make it as quick and as fast and get it done, and then dissolve the tax as quickly as possible, and rather than, again, raise the property taxes on people. So,
Well, thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your candor and everything you've said.
We work for you, Mr. Blackman.
anybody else? Oh, lady right here.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing and your candor. Ms. Zuko, what's the longest time anyone has been in the jail awaiting a trial, a hearing? I'm sorry. And along the lines of, yeah, it's kind of, I haven't been there, I didn't grow up with it, haven't lived it, with the idea of no taxes whatsoever, and it's like, well, how do you think roads, schools, libraries are going to be built? We're going to, it's like emergency rooms if people don't have health care. We're going to pay somehow. We're not going to get out of it, as far as I can see. But the idea of, I've thought of this with property tax, to the idea of, because we do have something here in the county where if one is on disability or one is over a certain age,
Veterans,
right,
have an exemption for property taxes.
yes, and if in some way there were an exemption, if one is on SNAP/food stamps, something where a criteria, the criteria have already been met, so that they're under a certain level of, I can't think of what it's called, where they, somehow it could be figured out.
So this is a TPT retail tax. It is not on food. The food tax is municipality driven. The county does not have a food tax. So this tax will not affect food, people buying food. It is only on the retail TPT. Transaction privilege tax, sales tax. But that's the DOR calls it transaction privilege tax. So if you own a business and you conduct a transaction, The state says it's a privilege for you to do that transaction, so they charge you a tax for that privilege. So it's the transaction privilege tax. So if you, like I just went and got tires on my car, right? So I paid for that. That comes out of, that half-cent sales tax will be added to that. If you go buy a refrigerator, or, you know, in some situations, there's certain categories. I wish I had it handy, but the Department of Revenue, if you go look at, you can go Google it, Department of Revenue, Cochise County sales tax, and it will show you a table of about 25 taxes that are subject to TPT. And it will list all these categories. There's certain construction items, there's gasoline, there's big retail items, there's small retail items, and it varies based on that. But that table will show you what is taxed with this half-cent sales tax. And food is not on that list. So people that have SNAP and everything else, they will have to decide where they, and I don't know, does Sierra Vista have food tax? I don't know if they do. Does anybody know? I know Wilcox does, I know Benson does, and I know Douglas does. So it's a 2.5% sales tax if you go to the Safeway in Wilcox there. But that is the city, because that's the only source of revenue that they have, is that sales tax. So that's on them. But I don't know if SNAP is tax exempt. I have no idea. I haven't honestly, so. But anyways, did you want to talk about the population?
So your first question, our average length of stay is about 14 days, because the majority of folks get out at their initial appearance. Like I said, within 24 hours, you have to see a judge once you're brought to jail, and most people get released on their own reconnaissance, or they post bail or bond, whatever the case may be. But we do have those crimes, murder, very serious violent crimes, where those cases can take up to 3 years to be adjudicated. And that's the longest length of stay we've had, is approximately 3 years.
Anybody else? In the back? Nope.
I'm sure you can hear me without the microphone.
Well, we're trying to pick up the mic so
Oh,
that
I'm
the people
sorry.
watching at home can hear you as well.
For the sheriff, the gentleman, Mike. You said there's 14 beds at the hospital for the mentally ill. What percentage of the people, your population, are just mentally ill and not real criminals?
So everybody that's in there has committed some kind of crime or been charged with some kind of crime. They don't just bring them to us because they're mentally ill. But a few years ago, we took a snapshot on one single day and looked through everybody that was there, and 66% of the population that day at some time in their life received some kind of services from a mental health provider. 66.
So if the hospital had more than 14 beds, you could put more of your people in there.
So real quick, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but what Cochise County needs is a crisis center. So a crisis center has two sides. It has beds and it has chairs. So Mr. Circle K that I was talking about a little while ago, maybe we take him to the crisis center and he sits in a bed, watches 4 or 5 episodes of Gilligan's Island, eats a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he's good to go. He can go back out. But maybe Mr. Circle K needs 72 hours. So he goes to the bedside, sees a mental health professional, gets back on some medication, and then he can go back out. Or at that point, we can refer him to a mental hospital in Tucson or Phoenix, wherever that may be. But a crisis center would go a long, long way in this county. 10 years ago, and the sheriff and I have been preaching this for a long, long time. 10 years ago, the Legacy Foundation actually donated a building and said, here's a building, you guys make a crisis center, and obviously the sheriff's office doesn't run crisis centers. So we shopped all around, local health agencies, we went to the state, we went to everybody, couldn't find anybody to run it. So that's why we don't have a crisis center.
Thank you.
So Ms. Gomez, who's here tonight, she's in Phoenix. There's a thing she's doing up there. One of her goals is to bring back, we used to have a county hospital in Cochise County, but it was closed due to the border issue. It was down in Douglas. She is working with TMC and Crondale and these guys to try to bring that back. Her plan is to include a wing in that hospital for just what the commander said. But that's a whole separate category. And there's we're hoping to get grant money and additional state funding where we don't have to get a half-cent sales tax for that. So That's a separate effort that Ms. Gomez, that's of course her district out down there in Douglas, but she's trying to get that back. It used to be there, but because of all the people coming across the border and using services and having kids there, the legislature shut that down back in like 2010, 2011 during the budget crisis. When we just couldn't afford a lot of the costs related to rural health care, and that was a problem back then. But it never reopened. It was closed for so long that it wasn't able to come back. Once it gets to a certain point, you have to build a new one. So that's what Ms. Gomez is working on. So hopefully that will come next and help solve that problem. Oh, over here in the front. You get a catch? Yeah. Toss over the microphone.
Okay, my question is on the location. It was my understanding that the Board of Supervisors voted on the location to be in Bisbee, but not a particular location. And in your pamphlet here, it says the actual address of where the current ones are.
Yeah. So no, we did have a board meeting and we did vote for the specific location that was outlined. There were options. It was hard to see. Chin created all these different site studies, and they were numbered. And the one particular one by the jail, I don't remember what number it was, but whatever number that was the one that we voted on, and that's the one right next to the existing jail. It's just to the west of that. The other site in Bisbee was the one next to the county complex, and the reason we didn't vote for that one. Now, I voted no on it. I'm just being truth and taxation honest here. I wanted the jail in Tombstone, but that's a whole other story. I'm not going to open that wound because Ms. Gomez and Mr. Crosby voted to put it in Bisbee. But they voted also to put it right next to the existing one. The other site in Bisbee was next to the county complex, but that's on private land. The county would have to buy that land. So the land currently owned by the county. So we didn't have to buy the land. Everything costs depending on where you were going to put it. So if I got the jail in Tombstone, we were going to pay like almost $25 million to fix Middlemarch Road and put culverts in to be able to get to the jail there. And then if we built it next to the county complex, we'd had to pay $40 million for the land. And if we had we're building now, we got to pay $20 million to do all the dirt work and whatnot. So no matter where we put it, there is a cost associated. It's just different for different places, but those were the options in Bisbee. Was next to the existing jail or next to the county complex, and the least expensive one for infrastructure and land acquisition was the site that was chosen.
So what measures are going to be taken for mitigation of the land settling, which is causing a lot of the existing problems?
Yeah, so there's 2 washes there. And that's why it's going to cost $20 million, because there's going to be a lot of earthwork that's got to be done. There's 2 washes that have to be diverted for flood control so that we don't flood the jail. Because right now, the actual jail, when it rains, the water comes down the mountain and runs in the back of the current jail and fills the back of the jail up with water. And we also have to build a sufficient parking lot and turning area for the trucks, because the existing jail, you can't go in there with a 54-foot tractor trailer. So the lady that provides the service contract has to use smaller tractor trailers because it's hard to back in there. So we're going to remedy that with the new one. So we have to create enough flat land so that you have a turning radius so you can bring a regular tractor trailer in there to service the jail. That will reduce costs as well, because she charges us because she's got to take one truck and turn it into 2 trucks in order to be able to get it up to the jail. So there's another cost savings there by doing that. So all these little things that we learned that the current jail has to pay for now, the county pays for now, we're trying to mitigate that with the new jail, so that will help save money. So instead of having to pay for 2 drivers to drive 2 trucks, now we don't have to pay for 1 driver to drive 1 truck. So all that dirt work has to be done in order to create a flat level. But it's not going to be completely flat. I don't want to make you think we're going to just carve this huge flat spot. It's going to be terraced, basically. Depending on how we build this. So that's currently the plan, but that's where it's going to go.
Good evening. My name is David Walker, and I've moved off of Fort Huachuca in 1954 to live in Sierra Vista. My great-grandmother came to Cochise County in the late 1800s. no matter how we do it, it's gonna cost somebody something, and I think this is the most equitable way to do it. And the way to get it done is go to your churches, your organizations, and that sort of thing, and convince them to vote for that half-cent sales tax. My grandfather had the privilege of being in jail in the county courthouse many, many years ago for doing moonshine. And back in those days, they didn't worry too much about prisoners, but now they've got rights and television and all that other sort of things. So we need to do what we need to do and do it the most equitable way, and I think this is it.
We appreciate your comment. And along with that, I want to invite anybody, your civic group, your whoever, if you want to come and tour the jail, I have cards available. Get a card from me. Bring your Rotary, your Lions, your whoever else. And if you want to come and tour the jail, I'll give you a tour of the jail.
The old one or the new one?
The old one.
And then the new one. Don't have to go there.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a comment on the sales tax. We used to have this sales tax, the half-cent sales tax.
Right.
And now we don't have it.
Right.
Does anybody in here really have any idea whether it was on or off when they did their shopping? I don't think so, no. But also, I do not want my property tax to go up any further. And thank you for.
Yeah, I don't want my property taxes to go up either. It's not sounding selfish, but it's reality. It would be disproportionately high tax compared to the sales tax. That's the other problem. And again, because I can't remember the exact number. It's like 46% of the population is 41% of this county pays property taxes. So the other 59% would pay no taxes. So those 41% that get a tax would be the ones that pay for this jail, as opposed to only 80% of the money coming from Cochise County and 20% coming from people outside Cochise County, which, like I said, I'd rather have Pima County chip in and people from California chip in and people driving from Texas to California, vice versa, chip in. And that would be better than 41% of us paying for the jail. I mean, that's just the brutal reality. But again, the challenge here is there's a lot of confusion. Because I had a lady the other day said, well, why are we voting on this again? We already voted on it. Isn't that the case? And I had explained to her that there was a lawsuit and, we had an election, of course, in between there and things have changed and we're trying to do this a little bit differently to conserve tax dollars and get this thing done and off the books as quickly as possible. And once she understood that, and she had voted against it last time, and I said, well, this time it's not going to be 25 years, and we're asking for a 17-year period, but we're going to get a 15-year bond, and we're going to try to pay it off in 10 or 11 years. So that, to her, was more appealing than paying the tax for 25 years. And then I said that once it's paid, it's going away, and the tax goes away. So to your question again, on July 31st, the sales tax ended. That was part of the settlement agreement with the court that was approved by a Superior Court judge from Apache County that he approved the settlement. In that settlement, we had to stop the tax until we got reapproved by the voters with the election that had in-person voting available for the folks on the inactive voter list. So that was part of that settlement, that we had to stop that tax. It took us 90 days to stop it. The state has to notify everybody that has a point-of-sale machine, right? Everybody that does online business. So you have to give them 90 days to stop collecting that tax because they have to change the software and all that stuff. So you can't just turn it off. And then the same thing is you can't just turn it on. So it takes 6 months to turn the tax on. So they have to do the same thing, notify everybody and everything. So that's the state that requires that. So everybody says, well, the settlement agreement was reached in March. Why did it take till the end of July to turn the tax off? And that's why. We had to wait 3 months to get it turned off. It is off now. I don't know if you saw in the paper, Terry Joe, there's a couple of retailers that have not updated their software. And I guess they're still charging the tax. So she outed them yesterday in the paper. So if you do get charged, if you notice your receipt, you are getting charged. She outlined the steps. Is the first thing is you go back to the retailer, You say, hey, you overcharged me, there's only a 0.5-cent sales tax right now in Cochise County, you charged me a 1-cent sales tax, and ask them for a refund. It may only be like 8 cents or 20 cents, but if you want to make the point, and then if they refuse to do that or they don't do that, then you can notify the Attorney General's office or the Arizona Department of Revenue, and they'll go talk to them.
Put them in jail.
I don't know if they'll put them in jail. There's fines associated with that, and you know, businesses don't like paying fines, so those fines are big for certain businesses. They're big, so they will get a fine if they're overcharging you for transaction for TPT sales tax. So, but right now there is only a 0.5-cent sales tax as of right now in Cochise County, and then there's the 5.6% for the state. So if you live in the county, you should only be paying 6.1% sales tax on anything you buy out in the county. And then whatever city you live in, they add on to that 6.1. Yes, sir. Sorry. Over there. I thought you were there, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first I want to say I've been watching your slideshow. Just those pictures have depressed me. And I really feel bad for all of you who work there. I feel bad for those who, go there because they've done something wrong. Obviously, I am definitely for you all getting a new facility. I agree with the judge. Times have changed. We need to bring this up to better standards and for the benefit of all. And I kind of agree with your comment. I didn't even notice the tax went away. So, I know in the long run it comes up to a big amount. But to me personally, I think if I can give you that 0.5 cent, I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah, they did an analysis. If you're not buying a big ticket item like a car or something, and you're just doing routine spending on the normal day-to-day stuff that you buy at Walmart and whatnot, you're probably going to pay about $49 to $65 a person over a year is what it's going to. Is it a year? Yeah, over a year. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
That amount, that $67, that top amount, is if nobody else came into this county and just the residents of the county paid the 0.5-cent sales tax. So they estimate it's probably closer to that 40 amount because of all the transit people that come through on the I-10, come across the border to come shopping, all the rest of that. So it's actually closer to the 40, whatever.
So $40-$50 a person. So a family of 4, $200, somewhere in that neighborhood a year extra is probably what you're going to pay. So, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm Ron Faulkner at Sierra Vista. I see you have these presentations throughout the county, and like Colonel Black was saying here, a little bit concerned about the population, if they really get into the word and understand it. This group, I get the feel, does support the tax. But how about the cities? Are they doing anything, the city councils, to help you? And the newspaper, I don't think, is doing much for you either.
Well, yeah, sadly, Cochise County, we don't have a TV station, although I do see somebody here. Oh, she left.
That was Alexis.
Yeah, Channel 13 was here tonight, but we don't have a TV station in Cochise County. Our newspaper is hanging in there. It's not like most newspapers are on their way out. We've got Cool FM on Facebook and whatnot. I know I'm getting ready to go they're going to do an interview with me. I know they already did one with Miss Gomez and the sheriff. They're scheduling me
October 8th.
October 8th, where I'm going to go talk to them. I'm also going around to a lot of civic groups and talking to as many of them as I can. The cities are an interesting pickle. Sierra Vista is in good shape because it's the population center for Cochise County. The smaller towns have a hard time with it because they especially Benson really let me know it because there is a Safeway in Vail that is in Pima County and not in the city of Tucson. So the sales tax there is really low. And a lot of people from Benson run down the highway and they shop rather than at the Safeway or Walmart in Benson, they go shopping at this Safeway over in Vail. And they're worried that as that tax goes up, more people will go to that. I did hear the city of Tucson was in the process of trying to annex that safely though, so that may solve that problem.
But you said there was no tax on food.
Yeah, but in Benson there is. We don't have the tax on food. Benson has a tax on food, but they also have a tax on everything at Walmart. So you go to Walmart, you buy a non-food item, the sales tax, with the half-cent sales tax was, in Benson was like 9.9%. So unlike Sierra Vista that was at, I think it was like 8.9%, somewhere around there with the half-cent sales tax. That's a significant increase for Benson. So and because of their proximity right down the highway from Pima County, it's very easy for people to just jump on the highway and shoot down to the Walmart on Houghton or the Safeway there in Vail. That's where they're concerned. Wilcox isn't as bad. However, the mayor there did tell me that there is a number of people that what they do is they don't go to Safeway as frequently, and then they decide to just load up the car and they go to Safford, and then they load up the car at the Safeway in Safford and then drive back to Wilcox. So that was their concern. So they weren't big fans of the half-cent sales tax, although we just did the meeting in Wilcox. We had the mayor and the former mayor, who's still a councilman there, and they both came around and said they were now going to, they voted against it last time, but they were going to be supporting it this time because we reduced the duration, and that's what they're really happy about. We're going to try to get this done and over with as fast as we can, and that way and we're also, as the commander said, the county's going to pick up the cost of them for their incarceration and whatnot. We're going to relieve them of that cost, so they're going to be on board, hopefully. But we have not gotten formal declarations from the cities. We did. The mayors have sent a letter in support, but they have not done like city council votes or anything like along those lines. But it's we're a unique county, and we have very broad demographics depending on where people live, and everybody's different. So and everybody's got their own economic challenges. Everybody's got their own driving distances, and so it's just a unique situation to try to create that parity to get everybody to think. There'll be still significant people that won't vote for it because they just don't want to pay for a tax increase. I get that. I don't like paying taxes either.
Hello again.
Yeah.
Talking about publicity, I just happened to hear by chance that this meeting was taking place on Channel 4, KVOA, News 4 Tucson, Monday on the 10 o'clock news. Another great resource, if we want to get stuff out and more information to more people, is Arizona Public Media, AZPM. They have a lot of coverage throughout this county too. Throughout the state of Arizona, but out of the University of Arizona, so look them up.
They do receive all of our news releases. Yeah.
That's Jean's department. She's our public information officer that does all the notices and stuff. So when you see stuff, that comes from her. So she's the one that does that. It's very difficult, again, in a rural county. And I got a lot of people, like I live out near Dragoon, and the big thing out there in Cochise Stronghold in Dragoon is this opt-out, off-grid living stuff. And there's a lot of people out there that just have separated themselves from the world out there, and getting the word to them, getting them to vote, getting them to participate is a challenge. We did a meeting out there and like 4 people showed up.
There has to be a vested interest. If people don't realize it, we realize it more easily if it affects us directly, without realizing that everything is a reaction. Every action has a reaction and a ripple effect.
It's a challenge, and again, because we don't have a strong media presence in this county, it's a challenge getting information out. It just is. So we've gotten so much feedback that, just like you said, I heard about this at the last minute. Why didn't I hear about this? Jane sends it out to everybody. It's just that there's such a divided and disjointed system of public media and actual publications and newspapers and TV that people get their news here, people get their news here, everybody's getting their news these days from all these different sources. It ain't like it was 20 years ago when everybody was watching Dan Rather, and the local anchor at 6 o'clock every night. It just doesn't happen that way anymore.
Some of us are going to be social media. I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah, so that's a challenge. Anybody else got any? Oh yes, ma'am, in the back.
What preventative measures do you have in place to prevent another
lawsuit.
Oh, to prevent another lawsuit?
Yeah, that were the case.
Nothing can prevent another lawsuit. All right, so it's a free country. Anybody can sue anybody. I am anticipating that there is probably going to be another potential lawsuit resulting from this, but we'll see. One way to avoid a potential lawsuit is to get 60% of the voters to pass this. That would negate that whole point there, because that's one of the contentions that in the original lawsuit that 60% is required. We've gotten several court rulings already that say that is not the case for special districts under Title 48. It only applies to statewide referendums and initiatives, and this is not a referendum or an initiative. It is a ballot proposition. And local governments do propositions. We don't do referendums and initiatives. So that's the way the courts basically looked at it. And we had, this was a ruling at the Superior Court and the Appellate Court. The Supreme Court did not make that decision because we pulled our appeal out of the Supreme Court. It was at the Supreme Court, but rather than go through that process, both sides decided to settle. And then we got it, the settlement was agreed to by an out-of-county judge from Apache County, because Cochise County made the original ruling, the Cochise County Superior Court, and then it went to the Arizona Appeals Court, and then it went to the Arizona Supreme Court, and then they kicked it back to the Superior Court. So to avoid conflict, we brought in we didn't bring in the, was it Arizona Administrative Courts makes that decision? Who is it that picked the Apache County judge?
I did.
Oh, you did. to avoid a conflict, right? That's what it's for. It's good. Yeah. So.
Full disclosure, I was the judge that made the ruling on this. Oh, thanks. I was the judge that ruled in the first case and said I didn't think that you needed 60% of the vote, and I thought everything was done right. And the Court of Appeals agreed with me on all the points that I made, except on the mail-in only ballots, and that I should have, or that the county should have sent information packets and ballots to the people who were on the inactive voter list, or made polling stations available, so if they were on the inactive voter list, they could still have come and vote. So I think that the direct answer to your question is follow the law as far as the Court of Appeals said, and here's how you're supposed to do these, and make the polling stations open for people who want to walk in who maybe aren't, who are inactive voters who don't get the mail-in ballots. That's the easy answer is just follow the law. And then I conflicted off the case when it came back from the Court of Appeals, because by then my wife, the county attorney, was the county attorney, and it looks bad if she's getting sued and I'm ruling on it. So I had Mike Latham from Apache County handle that for me.
So if there is a lawsuit, it will be filed probably after the election, and then we'll deal with it. We have both outside counsel that we've hired to help us with those cases, and we've done fairly well with a lot of the challenges that have come down on this. And there's always the contention. There are people that just don't like paying taxes at all, and there are people that think that there's other ways that we could do this, and that's fine. But again, like we say at every meeting, provide that other way. Well, I'm open to any other, if you have any other viable suggestion other than no. You know, anybody can say no. That's the easiest answer in the world to give is no. But then what do? Right? We can't do nothing. I mean, we can't just continue on where we're at. The jail's falling apart. The sewer system collapsed. We just had to pay $400,000 to fix the fire alarm in that jail because the fire marshal came down and threatened to close the jail and move all the inmates to Pinal County. And so we had to spend $400,000 to bring a contractor in to fix the fire alarm, and then we had to hire another company to be fire guard watches while they were fixing the fire alarm, getting the fire alarm fixed, and that was another $100,000, 90-something grand, so like $500,000. This was just, and these things will continue to happen. What's going to be the next system that breaks? What's going to be is the wall going to collapse? Is there going to be an issue with the sewer system? Is there going to be, and we're constantly dumping all this money into this old building rather than getting the modern infrastructure for a new one. And it's expensive. These things aren't cheap. You know, when we talk about Yavapai County, Yavapai built their jail for $87 million. But that was, what, 10 years ago? 8 years ago? 8 years ago. So things have, you know, the price could go up. So now's the time to do it, because if we try to fix up the old jail, we're going to pour a whole bunch of money and just get a. All it's going to do is give us 15 years at the most. And we're going to spend almost $100 million to get 15 more years of life out of this old jail. It's just, to me, doesn't make fiscal sense to do that when we could spend $130 million and get a brand new jail that could last 100 and maybe more years. That's just the way I see it. So.
Anybody else? No? Nobody else? Any closing comments from the panel?
Thank you again for coming. It's been great. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and spreading the word. We got one left, and that's going to be in Benson next week.